What is up, everybody? Joe Sib here with Rad Parenting and my co-host,
Anea Bogue.
We are here. We are excited. We have a guest for the show today. Before I go into that, once again, got to thank every single one of you for listening, sharing our podcast on Facebook, and the reviews. I always say to Anea, you got to go to the review section because the things that you guys write about this show allow us to know how many people are listening and all the emails and questions we've been getting. You can always continue writing those questions and suggestions for the show. That's radparenting@gmail.com. And I just had to start out the show that way with thanking everyone.
I love it. Gratitude.
It's been a while since you and I have been in this room.
It feels like it.
About 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
2 weeks.
That's a long time for us.
2 weeks. We had some great shows over the last 2 weeks, which, by the way, I want to remind you guys, too, over the next couple weeks, more guests coming in, a lot of different topics. One of the topics I know we're going to get to, sleep training.
Oh yeah, they're on.
I've gotten like 5. Anea mentioned sleep training like I think a week or 2 weeks ago, and we have gotten so many emails from parents going, "We're about to have kids. Tell us about sleep training. we have kids." Yeah.
Yeah,
I love the
it's gonna be
term
good.
sleep training because it just sounds so serious
Or insane.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, like the sleep training at my house. Oh my gosh, I don't know about anyone else, but for the parents that you might share this with me, I feel it like I go to bed in one room and wake up in another because someone has a bad dream. I got to go sleep with them. Yeah, exactly. It's not even sleep training; it's nightmare training. All right. With all that said, the sleep training episode will be here shortly. All right. In the studio right now, we have talked about this for a while. This is Anea's friend, Dr. Patricia Fuchsia.
I've got some good friends.
Great friends.
Right?
Yeah. Great friends. And what I love about them is they loan us their time and their expertise. Dr. Patricia Fuchsia is a doctor of human sexuality and a marriage and family therapist, as well as an individual therapist, which I'm going to hit you up after the show for some private therapy because I always need that. I got to continue working on myself. But with all that said, today's show is going to be about the human sexuality, talking to our kids about it, how that all plays in today's society.
And why it's so important.
Why it is so important is really the meat and potatoes. Sorry, all you veggies out there. It's really just the core of what this show is about, why it is important. And I know some of you are cringing because I do too, talking about sexuality, sex, doing it. Yeah, all of that with your kids and why that is so important to our children, but also for us as parents. So welcome to the show, Patricia.
Thank you very much.
I met you at the improv.
Yes, you
did. At Anea's event.
Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, she reminded me when I saw her.
Nice.
I was like,
love
hey,
it.
I know that
love
smile.
it. Yeah, cool.
So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here.
I got to ask, the first thing I was going to ask, I think Anea, I kind of stole your question.
Well, you
want to start it off?
Yeah, let's get into the meat of it. Because I think that in order to really frame the show the way that I, had envisioned, like as a parent, what are the things I'd want to hear? And I think the way that I look at this topic when it comes to parenting is we as parents want our children to grow up into becoming whole, healthy human beings who are able to function and I always say reach their highest potential. I know because of, just the research and the work that I've done that human sexuality is such a huge part of the entire makeup of a human being. So I think as parents, the way that we need to approach this topic is if I want my child to become a whole, healthy human being and being a healthy sexual being as part of that, what do I need to do to ensure that happens? And that's what I'd really like us to talk about today.
Okay, great.
I loved how you framed that.
Thank you.
Yeah. You know why? I'll say this right now. Just being me, the word sexuality, I don't know.
It doesn't roll off your tongue the way
it doesn't. I don't know. I get like I don't know if it's scared or just uncomfortable. I don't know. Is that common?
It's very common because
Okay, cool.
most people relate the word sexuality to sex, having sex, sexual intercourse, when it's much more than that. Sexuality is a term that encompasses many parts of us as human beings: sensuality, intimacy, health and reproduction, orientation, and sexualization, which is kind of the dark, shadowy part, the control, the manipulative part of sexuality. And so we don't often pull it apart that way. We just look at the one word and go, oh, they're talking about sex.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then immediately you when it comes to kids and your family and even your wife, you just kind of clam up a little bit.
Well, that's interesting, because I grew up in a household, and I've probably said this on the show.
Are you going to talk about the mug again?
I won't talk about the mug.
Tell everyone about the mug, Anea.
Okay, so I use it as a point of reference because I think it gives people because when I say I grew up in what I think we would call a sex positive household, meaning that sex was never a taboo subject in my home. It was something that was treated as a positive, like there were jokes told in a way that was not demeaning or derogatory. And I always talk about the mugs that my parents had, and like one had a handle that was a penis, and the other one was the mug itself was a breast, and just little things like that told me that this is not like bodies aren't dirty. Being naked with somebody is not bad, and it I think it helped with my own personal development and my sense of sex not being a taboo subject. It has helped me with having a voice and a sense of agency around my own sexuality. And I think that that's really important. And as a mother of 2 daughters, I want my girls to go out there and make informed choices, to know that they can say yes, to know that they can say no, to not be burdened with all of the socialization that we currently is just so prevalent with girls, where it's like, well, I have to make a decision. Like if I'm in tune with my body and I say that this is something I want to do, whatever. I mean, to your point, Dr. Patricia, not just the like actually having intercourse, but engaging with like making out with someone or allowing somebody to touch my body. Does that mean that based on what I'm hearing out in the world, that if I allow that, I'm a slut? If I don't, I'm a prude. And where do I want to fit in all that? And how do I not allow those labels to diminish my sense of agency? So that's kind of like a big statement. What I would love to talk with you about is what are specific things that we can do as parents from the time our kids are young to ensure that there's open communication, comfortable communication. We're bringing energy, that our kids are not just going to be like, I'm never asking my parents about that thing.
I believe first and foremost, it starts with the parent. Meaning that we have to take a look at our own personal values, our beliefs, our comfort levels around sexuality.
And where those have come from, right?
Exactly. What type of education, if we had, what's going on in our marriage and our relationship, because whether it's said or unsaid, our kids sense that. It's the energy that's out in the home. So it starts with the parent. And from there, it's once they're educated, then it starts with the parent teaching their child.
Right.
And we can't count on our schools teaching our children any longer.
Right. We know that, right? So what are the numbers in
Absolutely.
terms of, I think we've also talked about this, but I can't even remember the numbers, but what are the numbers of like, in terms of schools in this country that are teaching abstinence-only sex education?
There's over 50% of our states, let's just say that, still are teaching abstinence in our schools. And
so just don't do it.
Just wait till you're married. Wait till you're married. And just last year alone, $70 million from our federal government.
Wait till you're married. A lot of bad marriages if you're doing that.
Well, I think seriously, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, anyone that waited till you were married and hey, it worked
no
out.
offense.
No, yeah, I always get so paranoid. I don't want to offend anyone, but yeah, the fact of saying not to do that and that's going to actually happen for the people that are able to do that, amazing. I can't imagine that being a real, true way to educate someone on sexuality by just saying let's not do that at all.
Absolutely.
Going right to the meat of it, though, you said. It really comes back. Let's start. Can we rewind for a second?
Sure.
Because the thing that just made my ear perk up is it's really about the parents understanding their own sexuality. And you said something,
and their level of comfort.
I was just going to say,
the topic.
Yeah, the level of comfort around the topic. Maybe there's not penis mugs like Anea's home that she grew up in.
Correct.
But can we discuss for the parents out there? Anyone, if you can find a mug that has a penis on it, send us a photo. I got to see this thing. Okay, radparenting@gmail.com.
I'll ask my parents.
Let's discuss for some parents right now that are listening, that are like, wow. how do we become this unit that we're comfortable with our own sexuality in our house? Can you describe that a little bit?
Sure.
What would be some ideas?
Well, first of all, you want to look at your own beliefs, your own values. Where did that come from? Who taught you about sexuality? Anea just shared this great story about the mugs, and it was this open, which she considered a positive environment. Not everybody had that. Were you told not to? Were you told don't touch? Were you told that's private? What messages were you given as a child? Because most times, it's the misinformation and the myths that we bring into our adult life that we transport to our children.
Got it.
So really important to wind that back and see, you mentioned something at the beginning that the word sexuality kind of created a little discomfort for you. And so this is what we need to look at.
Because I just associate it right away with
doing
the act of doing it.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's
the last thing we want our kids to be doing in our mind.
I want my daughter, though, like Anea said, though, to be 100% in control of her body and to be sexually aware and responsible.
We want them to make
super important, as well as my son.
We want them to
I'm
make
aware that that's
informed
gonna
decisions. Accurate, informed decisions, and that's going to come from education. And if schools are providing information, they are some of them, but it's mostly about health and reproduction.
Right.
We as parents need to provide that additional information to our children. We need to talk to them about intimacy. We need to talk to them about touching. We need to talk to them about relationships.
Right.
Let's go right into it. How do you open up that can of worms? Gosh, see, I put a negative thing on it. How do I go right into those conversations about touching and intimacy?
Well, here, let's start with when should they begin?
Age
Because the
appropriate.
longer that we wait with anything, right? It's like people are like, oh my God, so she's 13 or he's 13 now. Now do I have the talk? And at that point, you're like, oh my gosh. At a point in which your child is ready to be like, I don't want to hear anything you have to say, mom or dad, because I'm trying to figure out my own thing. You're going to introduce a topic as charged as sex and sexuality for the first time. So what would you say, Dr. Patricia, in terms of like for the conscious parent who's like, I really want to get this right? I know there's some evidence, right? Because in the Netherlands, they're doing it from itty bitty. So
they're doing it from preschool in the Netherlands, and their stats show that those children that are educated from preschool on, that they have less teen pregnancies, they have less abortions, they have less STDs, and it's not that they're having sex, later than our kids are here in the United States. They are just making more informed, educated decisions.
What would be? Because I know right now some parents are like, oh my gosh, talking about sex to these young kids. Once again, you used the term earlier, like age appropriate.
Correct.
How can you give me like
I'll give you an example.
Yeah, that's
like a kindergarten, someone that's 5 or 6 years old, you're probably not going to have the conversation about intercourse with them, but you might be having a conversation about what's appropriate touching and what's not. Grandma can hug you, a stranger can't. You're going to be teaching them age appropriately as they go up. And then maybe when they're 11 and they're getting ready, for puberty, you might start with the menstrual cycle. You might be starting with relationships, liking boys, liking girls. Is that normal? Is that not? It's age appropriate. But the important thing is to keep that communication open. That's a conversation that needs to flow and be a normal part of your household, not the awkward birds and the bees conversation.
Right. And I think when you don't when the conversations, I think it's interesting that when you're starting at preschool, and we're now talking not just about parents at home, but actual the public school system in the Netherlands has a sex education program that's in place from the time that they're young, and they're having conversations not only about like the physical pieces of being touched, having the right to say I don't want to hug you, right, which is a big thing we're starting to talk about, but also to talk about the emotions.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the part, is that what we tend to do is we make sex about the physical action, and we leave out the connection of the emotions and the psychology and the spiritual aspect about that. And so so many people, and I think you have numbers on this too, about what are the numbers of adults currently that are unsatisfied or unhappy or feeling not whole around who they are as sexual beings as a result of it being this, well, it's either a physical thing and it's fulfilling and it feels good, but it's without intimacy, or we have tremendous intimacy but we don't have any physical sex. So what are the numbers so we know where we are?
Well,
where
we
are
know
as adults?
Approximately that 50% of women and 40% of men will experience some sort of sexual concerns, questions, in their lifetime. Those stats are pretty real. And if you're thinking about that, most of these people are parents.
What do you mean by like concerns?
They could be maybe orgasmic concerns, desire concerns.
What's the number of women that are still faking orgasm?
Close to 70%. And that
70%.
Yes. And, speaking of that, that is the number 2 reason that women come into therapy, and that statistic has not changed either. 25 to 30% of women, they're having orgasmic problems. Desire for both men and women is around 20%, and that's been consistent. Those numbers aren't changing, and that tells us something about sexual education and communication. That's when it's causing actual distress when they're coming into therapy.
They're actually doing something about it.
They're actually doing something. It's caused a problem. So as a therapist, I'm working with that, but I'm also doing a lot of education. Sometimes, I would say probably about 40% of the time, it's really not a pathological and mental problem.
Right.
It really comes down to education.
Yes.
Lack of education. They weren't taught. They don't know how to bring this together in their relationship, which is so important, especially if you're going to be providing this information for your children.
I was just going to say, while you're saying all of that right there, it just goes back to, I've always used the analogy of the parenting toolbox, but right now what I'm realizing is that if you're not comfortable with your own sexuality as a parent, with your partner, or in your marriage or everything there, it almost starts with, hey, open up that, deal with that so that you can pass on the correct information and begin the path to maybe end the circle of this weird sexual tension that you've had, and you don't want to put that on your own kids. So do you ever feel that you do not have enough time in the day to do what you're supposed to get done? You're going to work, you're maybe trying to hit the gym, but you forgot that, I got to pick so-and-so up from daycare. I got to get my dad over to his doctor's appointment. I wanted to pick up the house before I left. Wow, check it out. How am I going to get everything done? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. Go to care.com. Care.com. Care.com is the world's largest digital marketplace for finding and managing family care. That is right. Family care needs can be unpredictable. You got sick kids. You need someone to stay home. Man, both parents are out there trying to make a living. Your kids get sick. Who's going to stay home? Who's going to miss out on that cash? Now you go to care.com and they'll have someone for you that can look after your kids. Don't stress your life away. Seriously, most working parents worry about their kids every minute of the day. You're more at ease and more focused when you know your kids or your parents or even your pets are well cared for. Best part is this, care.com provides access to a variety of background check options you can purchase to help make sure that you're making the best hiring decision. That's my favorite part right there. They're letting you know there's a million different things for you to check out on the background check options so you know who's going to be there with your kids or with your parents or with your pet taking care of the situation. Care.com. Check it out now. If you go to care.com right now, you ready for this? To save 30% off care.com premium membership, visit care.com/rad parenting when you subscribe, and you're going to get 30% off. Like I said, the world's moving a million miles an hour. You just want to take care of your kids and all the responsibilities. Let care.com help. If you're listening right now, maybe if you're like, wow, you know what? I've had those concerns, and you know what? Dr. Patricia just said some things that have ran through my mind, and you have kids. Maybe it's that opportunity, no different than when we go to the gym to make sure we lose those lbs so that we stick around. This question of human sexuality is so important that you gotta deal with that. And I just know from my own personal experience, whenever I have to deal with something on that level, it's like, I'll deal with that later. How do you get around that?
Well, we first have to realize that it's fundamentally who we are as human beings. It's the only part of our development that's normally done in secrecy. And that's just crazy. We need to talk about it. We don't, develop our children's reading and writing and walking and eating in secrecy. Why is our sexuality not normalized in our home? Why are we calling it a pee-pee and down there and don't touch in private?
Yes.
We need to use the correct terminology. It's a vulva and a penis, and we need to teach our children that. We need to normalize it in our home. Otherwise, they're going out as adolescents thinking that it's wrong, it's bad, we don't talk about it. And the shame that comes behind that, that's where our kids are getting in trouble. To inform them, to teach them, they will make better decisions in their lives. That's the
Absolutely.
bottom
That
line.
makes
And that's
sense.
been proven over and over again. And the other thing, Anea, I want to say to what you said about, so often when we're teaching our children about sexuality, we stay to reproduction and health. We don't want them to get pregnant. We don't want them to get an STD. But sexuality is so much broader than that. And this is where, as parents, we need to get informed. We need to educate ourselves. Sensuality is about pleasure. It's about touching. It's about how we feel about our body, how we feel about our partner's body. These are things that we can create in an age-appropriate way, teach our children about that. We need to teach them about intimacy. That is not sex. So often you'll hear people say, I'm in an intimate relationship, meaning that they're in a sexual relationship. Intimacy has nothing to do with the physicality of sexuality.
Right.
It is the emotional component.
Yeah.
That's caring, being kind, being vulnerable. These are all aspects, along with orientation, that we need to teach our children
Right.
about.
And a couple things on that. One, I think I have encountered so many people who they're having plenty of sex and they feel this deep void because the intimacy that is also just such a huge component of it's like food for the soul, right? That intimacy and that deeper spiritual connection. And there's a lot of people that like, well, but I'm hooking up, or even with my partner, we're having sex all the time. I don't know why we feel disconnected. So that's number one.
Or sometimes it's the other way around. We're not having sex, but we're super intimate.
Right.
There's plenty
And
of
how do we-
relationships
and how do we find
that
our way
have, that
back?
have gone into that, the ship sailed where the sex isn't there, but they still have this a love for the other person. But then this intimacy,
Other piece
this
is
other
missing.
piece of the puzzle isn't there. So,
Or
and that's hard.
adolescents, it's shown, there's several studies that show that adolescents hook up because they want to be hugged. They want, that kind of emotional and physical intimacy that they're not getting any
Right.
longer from their parents. And
Right.
so that's why they go to a partner and then they end up in a sexual relationship that they don't really want, but they want the other
Wow, that's
connection
super-
from it.
super
that's
interesting.
so powerful. And I think that the other thing that we need to say in terms of all this work we need to do as parents, like as the first step, is there's a level of comfort. Like once you have the information and you've worked through some of your own stuff, the energy with which you're able to have those conversations with your children completely shifts. Because I think that our kids are listening or feeling our energy as
Absolutely.
much as they are hearing our words. So if we're saying the right things, whatever that may be, the information, but we are so uncomfortable, we're telling them, this is an uncomfortable subject, this is a really uncomfortable subject, instead of, this is a completely normal, healthy part of being human.
Correct. There's no more the talk. Like I said earlier,
Yeah.
the birds and the bees. If we see our child masturbating, we don't want to, respond with shock or disgust. You just
Yeah.
want to let them know maybe
We do that in private.
Do that in private,
Yeah.
a place where, when, you make it a normal part of life because it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many, even as a therapist working with adults, there's so many sexual dysfunctions that come in because of those messages that they got from their parents.
The thing that's just running through my head that I got to jump in
Sure.
and say, because I know a lot of the parents are feeling the way that I think a lot of us do, and I'm speaking for that uncomfortable moment where you have to have these conversations and stuff. But what I've realized from raising, I have a teenager and I have another teenager that's about to start, is that if you start these conversations earlier, you get so much better at it. You break the ice.
Absolutely.
It's like anything else. It's like anything else you do in this world. Like, hey man, I want to be a better surfer. Well, you better start surfing more than once a summer, because once a year you're not going to get that good. All the dads that are playing golf, or all the parents that are getting into cooking together, you spend time doing it. When you
Right.
first start, you're not good at it. And I know from my own personal experience that these type of topics to dive into, my wife and I started them super early, age appropriate.
Absolutely.
My wife was great with that. There was never any shaming. I grew up in a household that was, similar to that. But the thing that I realized for me personal, and this is to speak to that listener that's going, how do I even start? The sooner that I started, I'm like, you know what? I got to dive into this. Let's just talk about it.
Absolutely.
It stopped being a big deal. And I felt that that's the hardest thing, at least for me personally, was to get over that. And now I can talk about sex all the time. Ask me
Right.
anything, Anea.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
If you jump in with a 13 and 14-year-old and this is the first time
Too
you're going
late.
to have that talk, you're the last person they're going to want to talk to.
Right.
It's already been established that it's an uncomfortable topic and nobody's nobody,
And by that point,
secret.
a 13-year-old is like, you're only talking to me about this because you want me to get pregnant. You're only talking about this with me because it makes you feel weird. I mean, that's just
and
true.
they also feel like they know more than you at that particular time.
But for those parents, right? Because if I'm a parent out there listening to this right now, I'm going, oh my gosh, so my daughter's 13 or my son is 14
Good
or
point.
whatever.
Good point.
What do you do?
What do you do? Because I still
Yes,
think there are things you
absolutely.
can do, and I have my own ideas, but I'd love to hear what you have to say.
You have to jump right in. But also, I think that you can, it's been my experience anyway, is when you're working with a 13 and 14-year-old for the first time, it's best that you communicate why you're starting there and your own fears and
That's
your
right.
own levels of being uncomfortable or
Yes.
maybe some values and beliefs that you held that you were not even conscious
Just
about.
be honest.
Absolutely. And say, I wish I would have, and the reasons why. This is what I've discovered about myself.
That's right.
That's so important. So at any age, you can jump in. There's plenty of resources, plenty of books out there, but be open and let them know why you're starting now.
And I think we can also call on, a trusted adult. Like, I feel like almost every kid has that, like, favorite aunt or uncle or former babysitter who is a trusted adult that because I've done this with my own girls. Like, I can't have this conversation with my girls, not because I don't want to, but I know there's certain things that my daughter's going to be more open and responsive if she has this other person that doesn't have the same investment, that, she just feels like I could just spill it, almost like going to a therapist, right? I can
Correct.
just spill it and not worry about, mom's going to come back and have something to say about this, or she's going to be worried the next time that I'm out or whatever. And I think that that's the other thing that we can do is we can identify who are those trusted adults that might have a great relationship with our kids that can sort of like help, like be on part of the team.
Absolutely. And provide them with the information that you feel is appropriate for your child.
Yeah.
As well as, check out the curriculum that they're teaching your child in school. Find out the details about that, and then you can build around that, because I can guarantee you, if they are providing sex education at your school, it's not comprehensive. It is a small piece of the pie, and it's up to us as parents to provide the rest. So who's going to teach them if we don't? They're going to go out there unprepared.
Well, and I always say, like, we wouldn't put a kid, she's 16. Okay, honey, here's the keys to the car. Good luck. Hope you don't kill yourself or anybody else. Like, we can't expect our children to know how to navigate this really powerful and potentially beautiful part of their lives with absolutely no guidance.
I'll use the analogy of surfing. You paddle out at a break with your son. I've been recently, we were up in Santa Cruz, Northern California, a lot of different surf breaks up there. And I thought about what Anea said. You wouldn't just send your son out there without you being there or knowing what type of currents are going on, what kind of swell directions happening. And I can say, just from what you said, being with my son, we're out in the water together, we're paddling out, and I'll say, hey man, outside. For all our non-surfers, that means there's sets coming in, there's waves coming in, and you want to be out past that so that you don't get caught inside. And let's dig. So we're paddling together, and I can say this to you right now. I've had those conversations with him, and even though I've been surfing my whole entire life, he'll say to me, Dad, I don't need a surf lesson right now. And I'm like, buddy. But the other day we were surfing, and like there's another guy in the water, and he gave my son some advice. Hey man, you're leaning too forward on that. When you come down the line, you should do this. And he listened to everything that guy said. Why? Because not Dad.
Right.
Yes.
So with these conversations, I would say what I've learned, have them earlier, get over it. It's going to happen. I know you don't want to hear that. It's going down. If you want grandchildren, how do you think they show up? And if you want your kids to be sexually aware and educated, why not be the people, the parents, to have these conversations and also talk to your partner and figure out maybe some of the things that maybe you didn't figure out before you started this family, and go through those the sexuality, the weirdness you might feel, and put it all on the table. It's tough to do, I'll tell you that.
No, it is, and I would like to say to the parents that are listening out there is that they're not alone. Don't think that they're the only parent that is struggling or has no concept or missed that sex ed class. This is an epidemic. This is in our society and our culture. Sex education is not comprehensively taught. Bottom line, we have to go out there and find it ourselves. You know, even as a therapist, I graduated with a master's degree as a marriage and family therapist with 2 days of sex education. And yet I was having all of these clients come to me. That's why I pursued my education and went for a doctorate in human sexuality, because we need that information. Half the time I'm an advocate on a soapbox, you know, wanting people to have this information. It's critical. So I just want to put that out there for the parents. Don't feel like you're alone. You're the only one that
Thanks
doesn't
for
know.
saying that.
No,
I love
that's
that you
awesome.
say that. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's true of just, I mean, and we won't get into all the reasons, but there are a lot of like obvious reasons, at least to me, why we are so uptight, shut down sexually, and it's like cutting off just a huge part of ourselves. So, and I think that's the other thing, just to really bring this home for parents to understand how important this is. What happens, instead of just sort of talking in broad strokes about like, well, yeah, this is a big part of being a human being, and so if we ignore that, there's a big part that's going to be underdeveloped. What are some of the ways, like what are some of the consequences when a child becomes an adult who does not have that part of their being developed in a healthy way? What can happen?
Well, unfulfilling sexual relationships,
Yep,
which
it's a big one.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
Unwanted pregnancies, STDs. They can get involved in abusive relationships, controlling, manipulative, being coerced.
I just learned what you said about wanting that intimacy, hugging that you're not getting from your parents because you've gotten older, and you get into a relationship where that exists, but then a whole other line of things exist with that relationship as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Parents, hug your kids, keep it going.
Yes.
You know.
But I can understand at a certain point where you don't want the hug from mom or dad anymore, and you go, hey, I'm going to get the hug from this person.
Right.
And then that leads to something
Which is
more.
all natural.
Which is
Yeah.
all natural and normal. You want them to have these intimate, beautiful, positive
Yes.
relationships, but along with that, you know, they have to understand the implications of getting involved in a sexual relationship.
Yes.
I can tell you right now, Dr. Patricia, that a lot of our listeners are going to want resources and things they can read about and sites they can go to. Is it okay? You mentioned earlier before we started the show that you would give your email out. That
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So my email is Dr. Patricia Fuchsia, and I'll spell that DrPatricia. My last name Fuchsia, Futia, @gmail.com. No spaces, no periods, just Dr.
Wonderful.
Patricia
And they can hit you
Fuchsia.
up.
Any questions that you have,
Yeah.
any resources that you need, because it is individual, and
Yeah.
you know, some are going to have different things that they require, and I'd be happy to provide it.
So let's do a quick recap.
Sure.
First step is to, and you correct me if I'm wrong, first step is take a look at ourselves, which is always to me like the first rule of parenting, in terms of like, we need to look at ourselves. What is the baggage we're bringing? What are our limitations as human beings? How do we get
What are
over
our
that?
comfort levels,
What are comfort levels?
values and beliefs around sexuality?
Right. And where did they come from? Which to me is
Exactly.
part of that whole exploration. Then the second step would be what? Just begin having conversations with your kids.
Absolutely.
Age appropriate conversations.
Right. Absolutely.
And which in my experience often is dictated by the questions that they're asking. That tells you where they are and what they're ready for, or if they've been exposed to things that maybe they're not ready for, and you need to figure out how to like reel that in or give them something around that so that it's not just a free for all and they're getting misinformed.
Correct. And I think in between those two, Anea, is also taking a look at what sex education is being provided to your children in their schools,
Right.
taking a look at their curriculum.
Yeah.
That's very, very important, because from there you're going to know, you know, what you need to supplement, what you need to provide to them, and most importantly is having those open conversations with your children. And remember that it's not one conversation.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing conversation. Normalize sexuality in your home.
Wonderful.
Wow. Thank you so much. I feel that we could spend another half hour with you.
I think we need to have her back.
I was going to say, will you come back and hang out?
Absolutely.
I love
Absolutely.
it. Dr. Patricia Fuchsia, thank you so much for joining the show. Are you on social media at all? Do you have like a Twitter or anything like that people could follow when you go out and speak or anything like that?
I have my
Or is the email the best way?
the email is probably the best
Okay, cool.
way.
But they can also go to your website,
They can
so
go to
let's
my
see.
website, and that's center, CENTER wsh.com.
Awesome.
That is my website, and they can check me out there or
Beautiful.
send me an email. Love to hear from you.
Really appreciate you taking the time to come on our show. I got to thank everyone. I know right now there's going to be a lot of emails coming to radparenting@gmail.com. I'm forwarding them all to you. And I'm so glad we had you on the show because we do get questions regularly about when to talk about sex with our children and human sexuality in general. So we will be getting all of those over to you. For the rest of you guys, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our show. I know you guys have a million podcasts out there, and Anea and I are still so blown away that you guys choose us out of all of those podcasts because there's so many of them. I see them on iTunes because I always like to see where we stand in the ratings, which, by the way, we're kind of crushing it. We're always in the top 100. I love that. Out of all the parenting podcasts out there, kids and family.
Nice.
Keep the reviews coming. Any questions, radparenting@gmail.com. My name is Joe Sid. We'll see you next week with my co-host,
Anea Bogue.
And are you ready? When we bail Patricia, we say 1, 2, 3, and we all yell late, as in later. You ready?
One.
Just so you guys know, Patricia's looking at me like,
What
are we
talking
doing?
about?
1, 2, 3, late.